All right, over this holiday time, we like to check in with some of our regular guests and catch up on what we went through in 2022 and look forward to 2023. And one of our special guests is Dan Riskin, science and technology specialist, who joins us quite often on our show every week, actually, on the morning drive. And it's nice to be able to spend a little bit longer than a few minutes with you, Dan. Um, but we certainly appreciate what you give us every Monday, and that is, some really interesting stories. And you have taught us that science can be very interesting. So thank you for that.
Well, you're very kind. The truth is, you are how my week starts. You're the very first people I talk to on a
Mm.
Monday morning. I mean, I roll out of bed, I get ready to talk to you guys, and really, when my vocal cords strike up for the week, it's to talk to you guys, and so it always
Good.
sets my week on a nice footing, and I do enjoy talking to you every week. But this will be nice to talk for more than 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, I always think when we talk to Dan, Lisa, like why couldn't Dan have been our science teacher in high school? Because then maybe I, would have been more interested in all this stuff.
Well,
And we get great feedback
true.
as well on Dan's segments.
Oh, that's nice.
There is a lot to be said for, and I don't know that I like this term because it insults so many, but dumbing down scientific stories and terms and explaining it in such a way, Dan, that like you do, where we can all wrap our heads around it, and you make it fun and you make it interesting. And so that's got to take some effort on your part, because if you were talking with another science guy, I'm sure, the conversation would be elevated a little bit.
Well, I mean, so when scientists talk to scientists, they have all these words that they know the meaning of that they can throw around and save a paragraph by just whipping out a term that's been defined
Right.
and everybody knows the definition. So it starts to sound a little jargony. But I mean, I wasn't a genius student who just rolled through school like it was the easiest thing in the world. And I didn't really find a passion for science until quite late. I mean, I didn't
Really?
think much about it until university. And then it was a couple of profs who, like you're saying, were really enthusiastic and really fun and were charismatic. I had this one prof who studied the hormones of ticks. And I remember thinking on the first day of class, like, what a useless, dumb thing. And by the end, I was like, I still think it's useless, but it's hilarious. Like, I really dig how into it this guy is. And it wasn't until much later that I realized actually it's not useless. There are a lot of reasons why tick hormones are quite important, especially with the rise of Lyme disease and all that stuff. But I think that the place where it's really easy for everybody to meet around science is the questions. And a good question everybody can understand, and then the answers sometimes are even less interesting. And where science gives you a new answer, it inevitably gives you more questions. And so that's the comfortable place for me to talk to anybody about science. And that's true whether I'm talking to scientists or whether I'm talking to non-scientists, is that it's the big questions that come up, like, what does this all mean? Like, talk about the rise of artificial intelligence and the ability of artificial intelligence to make art and do creative writing now. What does that mean?
Right.
What does that mean for education? What does that mean when you have an essay due and you could just
Yeah.
ask your computer to do the rough draft for you?
Right.
What does that mean for everybody? And those kinds of questions, scientists have opinions, but so do people who aren't scientists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Dan Riskin with us. He is our CTV science technology expert. Joins us every Monday on our program, and this is our holiday programming. Thanks for joining us. Mike and Lisa with you here on AM 800. So let's look at some of the top stories in science from this past year. And I completely forgot about this because it was right at the beginning of the year. The James Webb Space Telescope was one of the big stories right off the bat in January.
Yeah, it finally got to its parking spot in January. This is something we had waited decades for, is this brand new space telescope. It's floating out there in space 1.5 million kilometers away. But it's taking images that are just knocking everybody's socks off. And one thing about the James Webb Space Telescope, it's partly Canadian. So Canadians can brag about every one of those images, right? We helped build that thing. And those first images came back in July. And that was like one of these, I really hope this works. All our eggs were in one basket, like we spent decades on it. We spent billions of dollars. And then when it was sitting there in the launch pad, it was, I remember before they launched it, something happened in the room where they were moving it, and a strap broke and it bumped. And they were like, I think it's okay. And you're just like, oh, please don't send this thing 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, have it turn on and find out it's got a cracked lens or something like that. But no, it's working beautifully. And that's very exciting and very cool.
Why
That is
spend
awesome.
billions, though, like Dan, to do this on a telescope that has obviously used a lot of resources, a lot of money, and a lot of worry and stress to send this so far away? Like, what is the advantage for human I don't know, humankind of why we do stuff like this.
I mean, the what NASA likes to say is that those dollars don't get spent in space; they get spent on Earth. So, right, so all that money that gets spent on all those smart people having jobs and working through these problems and working on technologies that will have implications in other places, all of those investments pay off dividends. But the other thing is, like, fundamentally, this is what we're meant to do as a species, right? I mean, this is the great beyond. This is, I mean, why build a rocket to Mars? Why sail across the Atlantic? Why leave your house? I mean, it's all about the unknown. And so this, you don't know what you're going to get from a telescope like this. They just pointed this thing at the TRAPPIST exoplanets. It's a series of, I think it's 7 exoplanets that all orbit the same star that are very exciting in terms of they might have atmospheres kind of like Earth. And we need a good telescope to look at those. Now we're starting to have a look at it with a telescope that's up to the job. So, we're going to explore our world. And I think that has a fundamentally huge importance beyond even the dollars that are spent on the economy.
Yeah, and you talk about space stories, and a lot of it is, just for the just in case, or just, and you look at Armistice, it's the same sort of thing, right?
Right.
And that was a mission that was just, to get ready just in case. And and that's smart. We've got to be ready, or who knows? We could be a science fiction movie and the Earth could explode.
Yeah. NASA's DART mission is the mission where they redirected an asteroid, and this was a very cool test of an idea. I mean, we've made movies about an asteroid's going to come and hit the Earth. That's like a recurring theme. I think we all learned a lesson from the dinosaurs that would make for a bad day. Is there anything we could do? And people have played with different technologies, and one of the most basic ideas is play billiards with the thing, like smack into it and knock it off course. Now, if it's a big, huge asteroid, you're going to have to hit it pretty hard with your little space vehicle if you're going to hope to bump it. So what they did is they flew really fast into this thing. And what was really amazing and what really speaks to the age we live in is that there was a live feed, and you could look out the windshield of this thing as it was approaching that asteroid, and you saw it get closer and closer and closer, and then the signal went dead. It was just the coolest thing. And then it took about a week, but we found that it did work, and they were able to change the trajectory of this asteroid. And so for the first time, we have a little bit of a plan in case an asteroid is heading towards Earth to end civilization. If we get a couple of years warning, we should be able to send something up to intercept, knock it off course, and have it be a near miss.
Do we know the odds of this happening?
I think the odds are very, very low, but not zero. And so
right. So we better be ready.
Yeah. And you know what? It's not just for, a lot of these things have unintended benefits, right? A lot of the times you're like, well, you know what? Would this ever work to, let's say we have to, on our way to Mars, something comes up and we say, well, you know what? We did all the physics when we did that asteroid redirect. And so we know this will work, so you come up with different solutions. I mean, we saw that in Star Trek all the time, where they would use a machine that was intended for one thing and they'd, save an alien species with it or something like that, or take it to a holodeck or who knows what. It's just like that in real life. We really do live in the Star Trek world now.
Before we forget, I want to talk about nuclear fusion. This was something that came up not too long ago, and kind of at the end of the year, at the end of your list, really, of top science stories of 2022. How important is this? How important will it be for future generations? I suppose not in our lifetime.
Yeah, maybe our lifetime, but not this year. And so nuclear
maybe
fusion,
your lifetime.
let's all knock on wood and hope that everything goes fine for all of us. I'm definitely excited about nuclear fusion for my grandkids, maybe even my kids.
Okay.
But and maybe for me too. I'm hoping. They're saying decades, but the promise is it's so amazing what it promises. I mean, instead of burning gasoline and having carbon dioxide go into the atmosphere and make the planet hotter, instead of having nuclear fission, which is what nuclear plants currently use, and having, you don't have the CO2 going up in the atmosphere, but you have nuclear waste that you have to deal with. All these little downsides here and there. Wind farms are great, except that sometimes bats and birds fly into the wind turbines. Like there's always some kind of like a drawback. Nuclear fusion doesn't, as far as I can tell, does not have any kind of drawback like that, knock on wood. But what you're doing is you're taking two hydrogen atoms, swishing them together and making a helium atom, which is what happens on the sun all the time and produces tons of energy. That's why the sun glows. That's where all that fire comes from, is from nuclear fusion. So by making a really hot environment in a lab on Earth, you can make that happen here. The problem is it's always taken more energy to make it nice and hot so it can happen than you'd ever get out of it. And what happened in 2022 is that scientists finally crossed that threshold where they got more energy out of a fusion reaction than the energy they put in. And that says, someday we'll be able to have a power plant that's powered by this. And so like it runs on hydrogen. Hydrogen is in seawater. So you could take a liter of seawater and you would get as much energy out of a liter of seawater as you currently get out of 300 liters of gasoline. And it's seawater and it doesn't burn CO2. Like, it's just such an upside. And even if it is decades away, it's so smart to be investing in this technology because someday it's going to be what all of it runs on.
Wow. Dan Riskin, our science and technology expert, joining us here on AM 800. Mike Kaycook and Lisa Williams with you as we continue along. Happy holidays, everyone. And just to go on this theme, Dan, you've seen all these different inventions and developments over the years in science. Where would this rank, this nuclear fusion story and breakthrough? Where would this rank in like the stories you've lived through and the inventions?
It's hard to say. I feel like I would put it not as high as some people might put it because it's still a seed that's been planted. And we may look back on it and realize that it was the most important thing that happened in 2022. But it's hard to look at 2022 and take that as a take-home message because it's so far from blooming. It's so far from fruition. Yeah. But if I really had to pick it and say like, what would I characterize 2022? What's the big thing? I would say it's artificial intelligence. I'd say artificial intelligence has changed. Like, we're here now. It's always been the precipice. It's always been this promise. No, we're here now. Artificial intelligence, first of all, took on this protein folding problem. So proteins are incredibly diverse. There's so many different possible proteins that an animal can make, and all of them are just a string of amino acids, but they fold in really convoluted ways that are very hard to predict. And for our whole existence, the only way to find out the shape of a protein, what shape it folds into, is to take x-rays of it from all these different angles and do these calculations and work. And then for that one protein, you have the answer. Artificial intelligence just figured it out for all of them. Like, we have the answer for all of them. It just all of a sudden, like, it was like finding the cheat codes at the back of the video game magazine, and all of a sudden you know all the answers to the protein questions. And so artificial intelligence has moved science forward. But it's also doing, like, it's making art now. It's writing essays. And these tools are available to people. You can go on the internet and you can make a piece of art by just saying, I want a picture of a horse with a cat's face, and I want it to look kind of like Bob Dylan. Bang, done, boom, there it is. And we need more horse cat Bob Dylans in the world. And now we have it.
So, but what is the future then? I mean, if it's here now and producing so many amazing pieces of art and the like, what's the future of artificial intelligence? How far can it go? And, much like in the movies, could it backfire on us somehow?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the goods and all the bads, right? It's like any technology where you're like, oh, I didn't want that to happen, but we'll see. I mean, so one of the things that I think has shifted for me, even in the last month, with Chat GPX coming out, or GPT coming out, these new technologies that are so creative, where I've always thought, okay, people are the creative ones, and then the computers are the ones who kind of make it happen, right? So I come up with an idea for a graph I want to do, and then the computer can make the graph, but I'm like, I picked what the graph looks like, right? And then this year we had artificial intelligence suggesting to scientists what a neat experiment might be. Hey, here's an experiment I think you should do. And then the humans put together the experiment and do it. And then the artificial intelligence is proven correct. Like, it was a good idea to do that experiment because they found something. That's like, who's driving now? And now with these chat programs, if I need to, let's say I need to MC an event and I need some jokes that are on topic, and the bride and groom both work on telescopes, give me some jokes about telescopes. I need to do a stand-up event. Artificial intelligence can write a default script for me, which I can then start with. So like a collaborator instead of a tool. And that is really, I mean, what does that mean for the future? I don't know. Like, it's something to think about while you're sipping eggnog around the fire until the robots come and sit down next to you and have eggnog too.
Can you explain a little more, Dan? We're talking with Dan Riskin, our CTV science and technology expert here on AM 800, like how this Chat GPT works, like, because it has gotten a lot of attention lately. Is it kind of like an artificial intelligence Google search?
It's what it does is it looks at a huge library of documents, like zillions of them, and then looks for patterns in the way the sentences flow, and then tries to guess what's going to be said next based on what's already been said. And so you have an interaction with it. So you can pull it up on your computer and you can ask it a question. And it will remember the context of the questions you've asked before. And so I was actually interacting with it. I wanted to know the origins of some scientific words, and I wanted to know what the roots of those words were. And it was able to give me answers. And I said, hang on, that second half of your answer, tell me more about that. And then it was able to give me more context for what it had just said. And it's just, but it's not going and searching a database and coming up with numbers. And in fact, when you ask it certain kinds of questions, it'll say, no, I don't look up things for you. I just sort of have an idea of what's already out there. And so you can ask it to give you, like, how is Kurt Vonnegut different from other writers of his day? And it will give you a nice essay answer. But if you say, what's the rainfall going to be like in Mozambique next year? It's not going to have a number for you.
Wow. So it's like Google on steroids, really.
It's like,
I had a friend of mine say to it, like, write me an essay on the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah.
And it pumped out an essay. Like, if I'm a student, I'm like,
an
original?
This
is beautiful.
An
Totally
original?
Well, yeah. It just kind of takes all the information, right, Dan, of what's around there and turned it into a well-written essay. It was crazy.
Yeah. And like it's decently written. So like I had it, my brother, I was texting my brother as soon as I found out about this. I was texting my brother and I was saying, this is amazing. He's like, oh yeah, well, give me a story about Weird Al Yankovic at a farmer's market. I was like, okay, give me a story about Weird Al Yankovic at a farmer's market in the style of a stand-up comedian. And boom, like in 5 seconds, it's like, so there I am. I'm at the farmer's market, and who do I see? Weird Al Yankovic, who you know from being a parody, la da 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 da. And then it has like inside jokes about Weird Al Yankovic, and it's even got a story arc. Like, it's creepy. It's awesome. And like my wife's a prof. Like, how is she supposed to grade next semester? She asked for essays. Like, how is she going to know what was an original thought? But what does it matter, right? Like, this is the landscape now, right? So everybody has it. So why do we need to still teach?
Yeah. Why do I have to learn how to do this long division when there's calculators? Right?
It's kind of the same thing. It's the same question. And I'm somebody that really I like to do long division by hand every once in a while to make sure I still
You're wild, Dan. You're just too wild.
Every once in a while, it's not, and then I check my answer with a calculator, but I like to try by hand just to make sure I still can do it.
Yeah.
But, we're entering a time where for that English essay, you have a calculator. You have the equivalent of a calculator.
Yeah.
So to me, that's what really changed in 2022.
This is like the argument I made to my math teacher in high school when I wanted to drop out of the class. I promise you, I will not need math. I will not go into a career that requires any mathematical skills. And turns out I was right, because I can do anything. I don't need it. And this is
converting
Celsius and Fahrenheit. We have a chart for that, right?
Yeah, right. It's crazy.
Wall, I'm sure. Well, it's funny. The thing with math, and I'm struggling I've got young kids, and I'm starting to get that pushback from someone in my house. I won't name names, but it's a conversation that's coming up.
We can narrow it down, but
exactly. Yeah. So, but what I've been trying to get across is that math is fundamentally really beautiful and really cool. And so instead of like having a fight about the long division, I've been showing him TED Talks with drones flying around the audience and like all the applications you can do with this stuff. An invention that Cornell University made called a bicycle. It's half bicycle, half tricycle. And because the physics of those two things are so different, you can't steer it. And so they've got all these videos of people trying to turn on this weird invention. And I'm trying to like just drive home. That's what you can do with math. If you really want to have fun with it, it's not about the long division or converting Celsius to Fahrenheit. It's the fun.
Good point.
We'll see if I win. I don't know. He's not buying it yet, but we're working.
It'll get there one day.
What you're selling, he will.
Maybe I'll ask ChatGPT what speech I should give.
That's hilarious.
I'm going to say, how can I convince my kid to like math?
Before we let you go, how is your book going, Fiona the Fruit Bat? Can you give us a little background again as to what the book's about?
Thank you very much for bringing that up. Fiona the Fruit Bat was my first kids book. It came out in 2022. Obviously, the top science communication story of the year. obviously, at least in my house. It's a story of a bat that's scared to fly and has to uncover a secret hidden inside herself in order to take that first flight. And it mimics what really happens in bats, where they figure out how to echolocate right before they learn how to fly. And so I imagine for bats, I mean, I studied bats for my PhD, and I think about bats all the time. These bats are basically sitting in the dark, unable to echolocate for the whole time they're growing up, which, it's a few weeks, but it's still all that time. They're in a cave, it's dark, they don't know how to echolocate, they can't see because it's too dark. And then one day they're like, oh, if I shout in a certain way, I can perceive the whole room around me by the echoes. And so I made that into a story for kids, and it came out, and it's from Greystone Publishers. It's available wherever you get books, Fiona the Fruit Bat. And yeah, it was a really fun thing to do. The theme of the book is try something you're scared to do. And I was definitely scared to try this, and it was definitely new territory for me, but it's been really rewarding. And I've even, talked to some kids that like the book, and that's the toughest audience, because kids
That's what matters.
Kids don't.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Good for you. Well, we look forward to many more.
Yep, absolutely. The sequel coming in 2023.
The sequel.
Mike and Lisa,
maybe the movie.
Yeah.
Well, really, you never know, Dan. I mean, that would make for a great Disney movie.
It would.
Yeah.
So I listen, I got to just to follow up. ChatGPT says one way to help your child develop a positive attitude towards math is to make it fun and engaging. Try incorporating math into everyday activities such as cooking or shopping, and encourage your child to explore mathematical concepts. Blah blah blah. So there you go. I got the answer from ChatGPT in just that short period of time.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Amazing.
I love it.
Dan, thank you so much, not only for this broadcast, but for all the segments we do with you throughout the year. We always love talking to you on Monday mornings, and enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Yeah, I hope you guys have a great holiday. I hope your listeners have a great holiday. And let's do lots of science in the new year.